Welcome to the Three Championship Drive podcast on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi, the same way you see it spelled on the screen. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, like the video, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan. So Zach was working when I wouldn't say break, I didn't say I broke the news. I just reacted to it later at night. I did get a text message from Zach though, showing me a screenshot because I don't know. You wake up at like 5 o'clock at night. So it's pretty funny. Like when you get the news, I'm like already 7 hours into it, which is hilarious, but I still appreciate it. And
Hey
it's not a
man,
knock on you. You know,
I gotta do what
yeah,
you gotta do. And
yeah.
it's crazy though, because both the times, because I sent you both the Trajan Langdon signing news, and I also sent you the fire of Troy Weaver. Thank God, by the way. I sent them both to you. I got the notifications both time, literally as I was leaving my driveway at my house. So like I got in my car, plugged it in, plugged it up to the Bluetooth, and then ESPN. I was like, What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh shit, I gotta send this to him." But apparently everyone already knew. But hey, man, I'm late to it, but I still knew about it.
But you're on time delivering it to me. Like as soon as you get it, you're like,
Oh, I'm there.
screenshot, send it over to Lance,
I'm there.
which is great.
Anything, any
Yeah.
Pistons news, I'm on it.
Do you feel like you're getting more Pistons news, or were you always getting the same amount before you started doing this?
Well, I started following more of their stuff,
Oh, okay. Just making
so
sure.
I started getting more notifications. Now, granted, I still had the typical notifications for game start, halftime scores, and final scores type stuff. But once I started doing this, I also gave the little check mark to the news, so they would send me that information as well. So, but no, I mean, I'm learning more as we go about everything that I need to know for the show. So,
Yeah, you are. You are. But let's hear. Everybody's already heard my thoughts, and I'll throw them in here as well, like as you're talking. But give me your thoughts. You know, don't go on like a 10-minute rant because I know you're capable of doing that. But
hey, man,
you
all
know,
right.
condense it down because we already got one 10-minute rant from me. We don't need two. So I
So
talked a long time about it. But
first
what are your
off,
thoughts on Troy
one
Weaver?
of these times when these news breaks for something crazy, man, we're gonna do the pod, and I'm gonna have it on my phone, and it's gonna be me driving with my take. By the way, we're gonna do that. But anyway, so and we're talking about Troy Weaver. You know how, what was it, 2 shows ago? How you prayed to the basketball gods? Here the fuck it is. This is our first prayer right here. Is bringing in the guy, one of the list of the select three that we had that we thought were good fits, and then him finally doing the deed that needed to be done and getting rid of the cancerous source of Troy Weaver out of his position to just send him to the abyss, to whatever team wants him. Take him. He's yours. He's out. Trajan Langdon knew it. I think he knew it from day one. Getting the job, getting the hire, sat down, was like, this guy ain't it. He's not going to be it. Give me some time. We're going to move him. The Troy Weaver firing is the start to another rebuild, I think, and it's going to be a better one. And I hate saying that because it's just, oh, we're going to rebuild. Oh, we're going to rebuild. We have opportunity here. Like, I think this guy is going to put us in the right position to be successful. Troy was not. Troy showed that he was not capable of that. So I think Trajan Langdon, I think that was one of his first orders, is taking this position. And I think it was very important to him and the fan base and the team. So let alone whatever he does next, this is a first positive step. And I think we both called it. And this is really good for the organization.
But isn't it? It's kind of funny when I think about it that Tom Gore's just elected not to fire Troy Weaver when he should have, like,
Yeah.
during at the beginning of when the offseason started for the Detroit Pistons. Instead, he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna let this guy sit and stew. He's gonna think about his job and his future with this organization. And then I'm gonna hire a president of basketball operations and I'm just gonna tell him, hey, dude, you need to get rid of this guy because I don't want to. I think that is just, it's so amazing. I wish I could be, I personally wouldn't do it as an owner of a sports. I would just do it myself and get the ball rolling. But I just find it hilarious that Tom Gore's waited for the president of basketball operations. I mean, maybe there's a part of him where he's like, maybe the next guy will like Troy Weaver. Maybe he wants to keep him as a GM. Maybe he'll ask him a scouting job, offer him a scouting job, and he'll take it. I don't know. But it was just, it's just a little funny and I find it pretty humorous that Tom Gores just waited till the president of basketball operations was hired before letting Troy Weaver go.
I don't think Tom Gores has the balls to make any decision without with it going publicly for it to be a big decision other than hiring somebody. Like, look what I did. Look what I did. Not look who I got rid of. So even during the losing streak that they had, Tom Gores really wasn't, he didn't really talk a whole lot about it. I didn't see him come to the media and say a whole bunch of stuff or put anything on Monty Williams or put pressure on Troy Weaver. There wasn't really anything towards him making a big decision that was affecting negatively towards somebody. You only see him paying Monty Williams so much money, the highest paid coach in the NBA, or hiring Trajan Langdon. Oh my God, this is great. There's no Tom Gores. Oh, well, we're going to fire Troy Weaver. And I think that maybe him being afraid to do it, I could be completely wrong, but all said that is, well, we're good. We're good. We have a start, no matter who was in charge of it, no matter who wanted to do it. Hopefully it was Trajan Langdon. Hopefully this is his call and not a Tom Gores, hey, we want to do this. Now you have to do it because you're here. Hopefully that's not the case. But either or, I think we're starting to set up for some success in the future. And we even talked about too, we had the discussion that this needed to happen before the NBA draft. This needed to happen a month or so before the draft. So Trajan had an opportunity to scout what he wanted, to move who he does wherever he wants with the team and whoever's on it with his current roster. So I think the timing is perfect. I think what they did is great. They didn't let Troy sit there too long before they decided to boot him on out.
You gotta read about I don't want to call it a secret press conference, but I think it was a private press conference that Tom Gores had with certain members of the media. It was pretty funny because he did talk about how much the Pistons have done for the community, and that was pretty funny.
It's always the community. It's never the team, man. It's never the team. We get charity work is great. We get it. No one's hating on it ever. You want to give to the city of Detroit. You want to do positive things. That's great. But at this point, we don't care about the charity, man. We need the team to start tumbling a little bit. And I feel like that's all Tom Gores talks about.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's all he talks about, but it was just funny that it's I'm not going to talk about the actual basketball stuff, but I'm going to talk about what's going on outside of the basketball stuff. And there was one tweet, I forget who it was by, but I just remembered what they had said where it's dude, the Pistons could be selling drugs, and if you're winning, nobody cares. And it's just so funny because winning does cure all. Nobody cares.
Yep.
It's good that the community stuff is there. You should be doing that regardless. You're a billionaire. You have the means to help out, but we all know what it is when you're doing it through it. Dude, it's like a tax write-off. That's all it is. Yeah. So, but anyways, I don't even know why we're getting into this stuff. But anyways, this was my fault. I drug us here. But Trajan Langdon does have plans to hire a GM, and it's Michael Blackstone from the New Orleans Pelicans, someone he's very familiar with. And from what I've read, someone that has put in some creative clauses into the contracts for the Pelicans. So I've also heard that maybe Tayshaun Prince might be in the running for the GM spot, which would also be why am I calling it an upgrade? You know what I mean? When you're advancing in your career, blanking on the name. But anyways, those are two names to watch for. I definitely think it's probably going to be Michael Blackstone, just because he is very familiar with Trajan Langdon. They've worked together and they've done good things in New Orleans. So I would expect him to get the GM job. And it's also someone Trajan Langdon respects and trusts because they have worked together before.
Now, with this, talking about bringing in kind of who he wants, I, as much as I've done this comparison before, but look at the success of the Detroit Lions. Look at the positivity between the coaching staff and the management. They are always with each other, agreed 100%. They go all in with each other every decision that they make when it comes to drafting, coaching decisions, bringing in free agents. And I think that's the most important thing. I think that's what we were missing for a long time with the Pistons organization is there was no mesh. We did not have agreements. We just had someone making a decision and then another piece I guess we have no choice but to do this. So whatever he brings in, as long as there's that positive relationship between him and whatever man he wants to run the show, I think we're going to be in good hands either way.
And that's a good point because then possibly Monty Williams might be on his way out from Detroit because it's not Langdon's coach. So if you're trusting him to hire the GM and you're actually giving him control and you're going to let him rebuild this team the way it needs to be rebuilt, they let Monty Williams go. Tom Gores eats the money because, who cares? 60 million is nothing to a billionaire. I mean, I don't know if I would. I'd probably just tell him to, hey, play out the contract. I'm not paying, I'm just going to pay you for doing your job. But anyways, and then if they do fire Monty Williams, I do expect Langdon to bring in the coach that what you were just saying. He can have those conversations with where they have that communication, because I feel like that is something this organization has missed since Troy Weaver became the GM. And again, maybe it's because they didn't have a president of basketball operations in place. So there's that disconnect when it comes to communication because there's nobody overseeing, then he has to go through all these other avenues to talk to Tom Gores and, all this other stuff. So now that they have Trajan Langdon in place, hopefully the communication's there. Hopefully he's not handcuffed and hiring the people he wants and he can bring them in so that communication can be restored and we can finally get this rebuild on the right path.
It's a start, and I think a lot of people are excited for it. A lot of the diehards out there, we've been dying for a change. Like we've been trying to get them to do something, and seeing something in media is a good thing right now. Whether it's picking up players or it's adding people to the coaching staff or anybody further in the department, I think so far so good. We're making the right moves.
Definitely. So we do have a little draft talk for you guys. We're not going to do another mock draft. I do know people appreciated it though. And I'm a little embarrassed at one of the players I picked to go in the lottery because I heard on another podcast that apparently that's impossible. So we're going to end the mock draft stuff because neither of us are scouts. But we are going to talk about a prospect that we're afraid to pass on. Because we're all talking about Dalton Connect and what he brings to the team. It's the shooting. It's, he's an older player, all these other things. But if you go with Dalton Connect, the safe pick, you're going to be passing on someone that could potentially be a two-way all-star or something. This is what people say, like drafting Dalton Connect is drafting Luke Kennard and not taking a chance on Donovan Mitchell. So basically, let's come up with our own award. Who is the Donovan Mitchell of this draft that the Pistons will pass on?
Oh,
and
man.
I'll turn it over to you first.
I want you to lead. I want you to lead.
Okay. So my pick would be Ron Holland. I was on the Res Ball podcast with Steve and Andy, and I was bringing up the whole Dalton Connect thing, and then they challenged me to say, well, who do you want the Pistons to draft? Not who you think they're going to draft. And I really want them to go. I mean, outside of Reed Shepherd, because I don't think he'll be available at 5, it's Ron Holland or Cody Williams. But I'm going to stick with Ron Holland. I'm really loving this guy's game. Now, there is a world where he ends up like Hamid Diallo, super athletic, doesn't put it all together. But then there's another world where he becomes a two-way monster and he just dominates. I know fans are concerned with the shooting. But this season with the G League Ignite, he was playing without a point guard. They were put in a lot of tough positions. So a lot of the shots he were given, they were tough shots. And I believe in his ability to create shots. I believe in his jumper. I believe it will come along. So that's why Ron Holland is the guy that I'm afraid of. When I watch his highlights, dude, I just for some reason think of Toronto Raptors Tracy McGrady before he blossomed into the 32 a game a night scorer in Orlando Magic. I just see that version of Tracy McGrady, and I'm just like, I get kind of giddy, and I'm like, dude, if that happens, we're gonna be kicking ourselves in the butt for a super long time. He's just one of those guys that I am afraid to pass on for the safer pick in Dalton Connect, because I think Dalton Connect will be great. I think he's going to be wonderful. I think he's going to give the Pistons what they need. But then again, Ron Holland sitting there with the 5th pick, with all that potential just oozing out of him, I'm afraid to pass on him.
So mine, I like the Ron Holland. I could agree with you that, but then again, as we look at drafts, man, everybody has potential. Everyone has the power to become the next greatest thing. And I'll live and die by saying that sometimes it's not always about the player. Sometimes it's kind of about where they go, what location they get put in, what kind of setup they have to be successful. And I kind of live with that because all these guys that are lottery picks or past lottery picks, they're obviously good enough to make it to the league. So I think when it comes to success and being able to hit or miss on a guy that's going to be successful in the Pistons roster, I think Cody Williams is the guy. I think it's someone that you can't really miss with what he brings to the table. As a freshman at Colorado, he put up good numbers, and being 6'8", 190. Yeah, he's a light on the lighter side, but he can shoot the ball well. I don't know. It makes me nervous how he's going to fit in the system, whether we keep Monty. I mean, I don't know how well, but I think that it's someone that you can't pass later in the draft. Like if we go ahead and trade down or something and he's available for, like I was gonna say Ron Holland, because I do agree with you. I think Ron Holland has a lot of upside, but I also think Cody Williams has a lot of upside as well. Now, I don't see a Donovan Mitchell type miss in this draft like this, because we've talked before that I think this draft is very set even. Like I think you have your 4 or 5 superstars that are pretty surefire hits that could be starters and 6-mans in the league. But as we drop farther down this draft, I think Cody Williams is someone that you can't miss on. I think he's going to bring what he has to the table. I think he's a young player, putting up the minutes that he did, and the points he did with Colorado. I think that's a surefire pick.
I do. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, you and I, we always get stuck on those two players, Ron Holland and Cody Williams. It's those two guys that they have the physical tools, they have the athletic ability. Cody Williams has the pedigree, being Jalen Williams' younger brother. He dealt with some injuries at Colorado, I think to his nose and his ankle, may have slowed him down a little bit. He did shoot a wonderful percentage from the three-point line, and it was on low volume. And it's so weird that, like, when you look at mock drafts, that there's a few of them that have him dropping out of the lottery, which just kind of blows my mind, because he's a legit 6'8", almost 200 pounds. Like, he's the prototype that you want on the wing. That, you could hopefully, if he fills out, he could potentially play the 4 for you, and how, the game is being played today. So it's so weird that he's dropping. And I feel like with Ron Holland and Cody Williams, just all over the place, whether you're a scout or an analyst, or whether you're guys like us that are just having fun on YouTube or on a podcast doing what we're doing, we're overthinking these guys so much when it's right in front of us. It's the same thing with Reed Shepherd. It's like, dude, this dude, like, he shot incredible. Like, the percentages are just off the charts when he was at Kentucky, and yet we're still thinking whether it will translate to the NBA. But then we almost have virtually no concerns about a Dalton Connect when it comes to his abilities on offense. It's just, it's crazy to me. But I think we're overthinking it with Ron Holland and Cody Williams. I think if the Pistons decide to go with either one of these guys at 5, they're going to be all right. They're going to be all right. Now, I'm a little wary that the Pistons don't really have a developmental coach in place that can help these guys reach their potential. That's the thing I'm afraid of. But a guy like Ron Holland and a guy like Cody Williams, I used to say this about Dwayne Wade. It wouldn't have mattered what situation he was going to go in. He was going to be great no matter what. Now, I don't know if that's the case with Ron Holland and Cody Williams. I'm willing to bet that's the case on those guys. They just seem like they're hoopers. They want to get in the gym, and they want to get better, and they want to excel at this sport. That's the vibe I get from those guys. And I could be totally off, but that's what I get from when I see these two play.
Yeah, and I agree with you, though. I think a lot of people, and I may be way off on this, Mark, but I think a lot of people are so high on Dalton Connect because of his age. Because when we brought a young Jaden Ivey with Monty Williams, we saw that maybe his confidence got killed a little bit. Now, bringing in an older player that knows what he brings to the table and knows how he plays and doesn't need a lot of like an assessment from a Monty Williams if he's someone that can't really help breed players to turn into what they're supposed to be with their potential. Maybe bringing in a Dalton Connect would work better with the system, just because he's been around longer than these younger players. Because we don't want to run into that situation too if we stick with Monty, and maybe he is the reason why these young guys aren't learning and playing well like they should be. Like, because Jaden Ivey could have a higher ceiling, maybe we just haven't seen it yet just because of coaching. So maybe that could be a scary thing if we keep Monty and we bring in a Ron Holland or a Cody Williams, and they get the Jaden Ivey, the Ausar Thompson treatment, which could be really bad, because then we just blew another fifth overall pick back to back. So I don't know. When it comes to grabbing the younger guys. That's what I think with Dalton Connect is bringing in someone more mature that understands their play style and doesn't have to be kind of coached the way that these younger guys do when they come into the league.
Well, and he has the skill set of shooting that's going to put him on the floor. Jaden Ivey, that's what he struggles with. Ausar Thompson struggles with his shot. Ron Holland, Cody Williams. We don't know what they will do in the NBA, but based on what we've seen, they're most likely going to struggle with shooting jumpers in the NBA. But they do a lot of things that are wonderful, and that if you put them in the right system and you put them in a position where they can actually succeed and play to their strengths, they're going to be just fine. But under Monty, you never know what's going to happen. So we'll see when draft time comes. We have a couple trades that we want to talk about, and the first one, I'm kind of feeling it. I'll tell you why in a second. I know some Pistons fans are going to be upset because, we have a tendency to fall in love with our own players. We think they're all going to be great. We think they can do no wrong. Everybody's a Hall of Famer on the Pistons right now. That's just the way it is. But there is a Bleacher Report trade with the Phoenix Suns. The trade is Damian Lee in the 22nd pick for Marcus Sasser. So Damian Lee is a 3-and-D. He's averaged 37.9 career from the three-point line and 3 attempts per game. Marcus Sasser, he's a point guard that the Phoenix Suns need. He made 37.5% from three this season as a rookie with 3 assists to 1 turnover. The Phoenix Suns need a point guard. New head coach Mike Budenholzer said, we need to think about it. We need to be able to play without one. We probably need to have one. And he was talking about a point guard. So my question to you is, do you love or do you hate this trade? There is no in between. Either you love it or you hate it. But what are your thoughts on it?
I like it. I like it, love it, like it, not hate it, love it, whatever you want me to say to make you happy. I think that's good for not only the Pistons, but I really think it's good for Marcus Sasser as well. I think that puts him in a great situation. Now, being an undersized guard, going to a team that's really lengthy, that he's going to be a really weird mesh with the Phoenix Suns. But adding Damian Lee, being a pretty consistent outside shooter, I think he shoots around 44%, which is really good for this team. And also being a 6'6" guard, that adds a lot of length to us as well. And obviously he would come off the bench. He would not be a starter, whether we keep like Quentin Grimes or depending on who we draft. I think he would be a phenomenal off the bench player. So I would go with this. And plus grabbing another pick at 22 just gives Trajan Langdon another opportunity to either trade a pick or grab somebody that falls all the way down like Bronny James. And it just I'm just kidding. But you don't know. I think you run with it if the opportunity is there, because it gives Trajan an opportunity to do what he wants to do with these picks and kind of build what he wants to in Detroit.
Okay, and we all know you're not joking about Bronny James. You love him at 22.
No, stop it. Quit it. We don't have enough money to bring in his dad, bro. We don't need that.
Actually, out of the 2 teams that do have cap space, Detroit and Philadelphia have the most.
Man, I'm good.
So I love the trade. I agree with Zach. I love the trade because Marcus Sasser is an undersized scoring guard. You can find guys that provide the same skill set as he does, but they're bigger and they won't be such a liability on defense. Even though he is a dog defensively, he's 6'1". He is undersized. He is limited in what he can provide you defensively. The game is going one way. I think he'll be in the NBA for a long time, but unless he is an elite scorer like an Isaiah Thomas or a Lou Williams or some of these other undersized guards, it's going to be real tough for him to have a role outside of the role he's playing right now, which is most likely a third guard or a fourth guard, depending on however your roster is set up. So I'm okay with them trading it. I really do love it. I think Damian Lee provides a skill set on the perimeter and defensively, and he gives you great size, and you can play him up and down the lineup with a Jaden Ivey, with a Cade Cunningham, with Quentin Grimes, with whoever's on this roster. It just makes sense. And you can do a lot of different combinations. So I'm all for it. And I do believe the Pistons can find a player that is better than Marcus Sasser at pick 22. And if they can't find a player, they can find a player that can still provide what he provides. Or, like you were saying, it gives Langdon to take a chance on a guy, maybe like a Tyler Smith, maybe like a Deron Holmes at a day, and who I know a lot of fans love. Deron Holmes, he looks like he's going to be real solid. Tyler Smith, a little bit more of a raw prospect, but, maybe in a year or two, Trajan Langdon, he can strike gold with them. So there are options at number 22. I'm okay with passing on Sasser. I don't think he's going to be an elite 6-man. I think he's going to be a rotation guard at best throughout his career. Yeah, you can probably get some years out of him for that. But, unless he's playing alongside Cade Cunningham off the ball, it really just doesn't make sense. And it's really hard for him to find a role on this team going forward for years and years and years to come. But in Phoenix, it does make a lot of sense because they have so much gravity being pulled towards Kevin Durant, towards Devin Booker, towards Bradley Beal, that it will open up a lot of shots for him. And he's a pretty good point guard in terms of setting the table and keeping the turnovers down. That's what I like about him. But the Pistons, they have Cade, they have Jaden Ivey. Those guys get more priority over Marcus Sasser. So I say trade him while his value's high.
No, I agree completely. And I think in this draft, when it comes to guards, I think it's really deep. And that's what you taking a risk. I mean, you're not going to get a premier guard at 22, I don't think. But you never know, man. Like we could take a Dalton Connect, or we could take a Ron Holland at 5. And then somehow, some way with that 22nd pick, a Jared McCain is still there, a Jacoby Walter is still there. There's opportunity in this draft, I think, with guards. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be a high risk, maybe a low reward at the end of the day. But if it gives us more opportunity to take a shot on a younger guy later in the first round, I say take it, because even Damian Lee's not going to be a bad person to put on this roster. I think he can fit in well with the guards that we have. If we have to, at the end of the day, Jaden Ivey can run the one. He can. You don't want him to, essentially, but he can if you don't want Damian Lee to do it. So I think when it comes to size and skill set, I think this is an upgrade. And especially grabbing another pick out of it, I think if it's on the table, you hit the button, you take it.
Yeah, I mean, you could end up drafting someone like a Devin Carter if he slips, because I know he's supposed to go late lottery or late second round, somewhere in there. Jared McCain, like you mentioned. I mean, Isaiah Collier out of
Yep.
USC, he might be an option as well.
Bronny
So,
James.
yeah, Bronny James, you never know. 22nd overall pick, it could work.
Hell yeah.
So I'm a fan of this trade. I really do like it. Now, there's another trade we're going to talk about. It's not really a trade. It's more about the availability of this player. And he's a two-time All-Star, and he is it's a very touchy subject with some of us in the Pistons community, because I am in favor of the Pistons trading for him. A lot of guys aren't. They don't know what he provides. They think he's too injury prone. They don't know the contract. All that is valid. All of that is fair. But we're going to talk about Zach LaVine and his availability. So the Chicago Bulls, they are lowering their asking price for Zach LaVine. I believe it was like an all-star or in a young player and multiple picks. I think that's what it was last year. But now they're basically willing to do a salary dump in the Pistons, have $60 million in cap space where they can absorb his contract and still have a little money to play with in free agency. So Zach LaVine, he is coming off an injury. He only played 29 games, I believe, for the Bulls. In 7 seasons with Chicago, he's averaging 24, 4.7 rebounds, 4.3 assists, while shooting 38% from 3 on 7 attempts. He is a 2-time All-Star. Now his contract, 3 years, $140 million left on his contract. Year 3 is a player option for $48.9 million. That is just insane. But injury or not, I'm perfectly fine with the Pistons pursuing him this offseason. I don't know who they would have to give up. I haven't looked at trades like that. I do know that the Bulls, like I said earlier, their asking price has dropped, and there isn't much of a market for Zach LaVine, and it has nothing to do with his talent. This dude is a shot maker. He's a shot creator, and he's one of the best in the NBA when he's healthy. Like, I think the way I look at it, you have to look at your roster and you have to say, is there anybody that can reach the heights that Zach LaVine has reached in the NBA? And if your answer is no, you have to take a chance on this guy. And it's not like he has missed quite a bit of games, but if you look back on his time with the Chicago Bulls, I believe last year he played 70 something games. I got to pull this up real quick. So last year he played 77 games. The year before he played 67, then 58, 60, 63. Those are his seasons with the Bulls. His first year he only played 24. But either way, like, he's been relatively healthy for the majority of those 7 seasons. Do you want to get closer to all 82? Of course. But if you can add an all-star talent to your team that can play off the ball with Cade, whose catch and shoot numbers, I want to say in 21 and 22, he shot 46% from 3 on catch and shoot on 3 attempts, then 41% the following year. He's good. Like, if you can get him to play off the ball, that would be great next to Cade Cunningham. And then when you're going to have Cade Cunningham rest for 3, 4, 5 minutes at a time, you have a guy that can just go cook and keep the offense rolling with Zach LaVine. But what are your thoughts on Zach LaVine, Zach?
You're gonna hate it
That's all good.
because I hate it. I'm not bringing in Zach LaVine. I'm not paying him the money for that. Just because of the fact that you talked about on the other podcast that you broke up with me and went to. We when you guys were having that conversation, it's like, yeah, you guys all loved it. Which I mean, I love Zach LaVine as a player. I really do. I think he's great. Watching Chicago play, I've seen him actually play live twice in Detroit. He is a lot of fun to watch. He is very electric, but I don't think he meshes well with the roster that we have, and I don't think he would work well with Cade. And that's just obviously my opinion. I think it's the money that we shouldn't spend on this guy, just risking the injuries. I think that's huge because he's been in the league for quite some time, and I don't want to risk paying all that money when maybe we could pick up some younger guys. One of the biggest things that you guys talked about on that podcast that you were on is I really enjoyed you guys having the conversation about bringing in smaller assets, bringing in guys that don't cost so much money and don't have to do one salary dump into one guy. Like, I'd rather bring in 3 or 4 guys that are good players to start this rebuild. I don't think you want to go and jump in and grab a Zach LaVine when you are starting with maybe a brand new coach. You're starting with a brand new GM. You're starting with a brand new president of basketball operations. I don't think that's the way that they should do this. I think they need to, unfortunately, try to look towards rebuilding this roster, doing it piece by piece, not superstar and then piece by piece. Because if you want to say that Cade is our star, I think you need to build around him. And bringing in Zach LaVine, I don't think those two guys will work well. So that's my opinion. I like running and grabbing small pieces to this rebuild before we go and reach for a guy that is an all-star, but he's been in the league for over 10 years, and he last year didn't really play that much. So I'm going to say with a hate, I'm not going to be into this. Now, if they do it, great. Zach LaVine will probably provide maybe 10 or 12 more wins to this team with how he plays, I think. But I don't think that's a play-in tournament team. So I think if we're going to start somewhere with all these brand new people within the organization, I think we slowly creep up to find our guy instead of maybe settle for Zach LaVine.
Okay, so you're saying he can't play with Cade, but okay, let me read this off to you. 2019, 2020, 42.6% on catch and shoot threes on 2.8 attempts. There's the first year. 2020, 21, 48.6% on 2.5 3-point attempts. Catch and shoot. This is him relocating without the ball, finding open space, someone passing him the ball and him hitting the shot. 21, 22, 46% from 3 on 2.6 attempts, 67 games. 22, 23, 41.6% on 3 attempts on catch and shoot threes. That to me screams, let me play with Cade Cunningham. Give me a point guard that can set the table. Like, I think those numbers are phenomenal. I think Zach LaVine could totally play with Cade Cunningham. Let Cade be the lead point guard, and then, let him set up the offense and let Zach LaVine cook without the ball, which is something he's capable of doing. Or you can put the ball in his hands and he can go out there. This team, we need shot makers more than anything. Like, I'm completely okay with forgetting about defense next year and just finding guys that put the ball in the basket and let us guys like Ausar, maybe a Ron Holland or, an Isaiah Stewart, let them do their thing defensively. This team right now, they just need to get used to putting the ball in the bucket and then letting the defense come along. Because you're not going to, it's harder to fix the defense from year to year than it is to fix the ball going into the hoop. And that's something you need. And they, outside of Cade, they really don't have a guy that can create a shot for himself. They do not have that. And they've struggled with this for such a long time. You need more of these guys. Look at Minnesota. They had such a great team built around defense. What happened in the playoffs? They didn't have a second guy that could go out and create a bucket. They needed that. When Anthony Edwards was stopped, when he started to stall, when he was getting tired, you needed someone else to go do that, and they didn't have it. So all the defense in the world didn't stop. It stopped them from advancing to the NBA Finals.
So do you see so in your mind, hypothetically, you can see a Cade Cunningham and Zach LaVine play in tournament Pistons team? To me, no, I'm not. I'm not hating on this at all. Trust me, I'm not. Because if they bring him in and he does a good job, then fuck me. They did a great job. That's awesome. Like, I don't care. I just from watching this guy play and watching Cade play and watching our floor spacing as it is right now with this team, I don't see it working. I don't see it working. But it's just my opinion. So I don't know. They could run this, and when it comes to the analytics, it's like, yeah, the stats are great on the catch and shoot, but I hope you are an NBA player of 12 years in the league that you can catch and shoot and make a bucket 48% of the time as an all-star. As an all-star, I'm not talking rookies. I'm not talking people that have been in the league for 3 years. I understand who Zach LaVine is, and I get what he brings to the table. I'm just saying, with the amount of money to dump on this, just to risk him not playing over 50% of the games, I think that's an L. Like, I don't think that's a win for us. That's why I would rather go with younger prospects that have potential, like, and see what Trajan Langdon can do with money instead of just dumping on one guy that could potentially only play 30 games for us. That's what I'm saying. I don't have any problem with Zach LaVine's talent. It's there. He's great. He's a showstopper. Like, he's amazing. And watching him live even made it better for me to understand who he is a player. Granted, that was back in like 2018, but I still got to see him play. So I understand what you're saying. I just don't think that that's the kind of move that we need to make for this team.
So for Zach LaVine, for everybody out there, just real quick, this is his 7 years in Chicago games played: 24, 63, 60, 58, 67, 77, 25. Yeah, there are 2 years where he played under 30 games, but like, I don't know. As long as
but he's nearing the end of his career though, and getting hurt near the end of the career, only playing 25 games. That is a concern to me. That is, and that's where I'm at.
No, I mean, and that's fine. I totally respect what you're saying.
He blows his knee out, and we pay him, Lance. I'm coming for you, man.
Like, I'm the one to blame for that. Okay, that's fine.
You're the scout here. Yeah. You're doing it, man.
I'm just looking at numbers, and I'm just like, I live in a fantasy world when it comes to basketball. That's it. I just want my team to be fun and entertaining.
Well,
and I do think it's not right now. I mean, like I said, if we're getting a call to make decisions, I think we can have some fun with this. But what I'm getting at is, I do think a backcourt of Cade and Zach LaVine. Yeah, Zach LaVine as the main guy. I don't see. They've been a playing team in Chicago, but like I've always said, he can be a piece to a winning team. He doesn't have to be the vocal point. He can just be one of the guys, and I think the team would be a lot better if Cade is your number one guy, where everybody's gunning for him. They game plan, they scout, they want to stop Cade Cunningham. Now you have another guy that you can rely on. Say when the pressure's on Cade and the defenses collapses, he actually has a consistent outside threat, a guy that can go out and get a bucket, a guy that can break down a defense in a one-on-one situation, a guy that can thrive in the pick and roll, which he has in Chicago. It's just, there's so much to love about his game. I get the contract, I get the injuries, but you're a 14-win team. You have to gamble. You have to be willing to play a few cards and say, you know what, dude, we're just gonna try something, because I promise you, the Pistons aren't spending all $60 million of that dollars this offseason. They got to spend, I think, like 90% of it, or they're going to get penalized. This is something I was talking with Steve from the Resball podcast. We were talking about, I was asking him the question because I knew there was a penalty involved. So they have to spend the money. They have to use up that cap space. And a great way of doing that is bringing in a Zach LaVine, where you could most likely still spend money on 2 free agents to come in and help balance the roster out. Like, I don't think the Pistons are going to spend $60 million in free agency. They're just not going to have that much roster turned around on this team. So I think you got to do the salary dump, maybe do some pick swaps, and then make either a smaller trade or just sign some smaller fish in free agency to make that all work out. But I'm all in favor of Zach LaVine.
I think this also comes down to the conversation we had months ago about, how about they ask Cade what he wants? Do you want to play with Zach LaVine? Is this going to work? Like, have the conversation with, and I think that's something Langdon would do, is go and talk to the team like, hey, I'm willing to do this. What do you guys want? Do you want it? Yes or no? Like, they need to have the connection there with that choice. So I think if it ends up being like an equal thing throughout the organization and the players, and they want to bring in Zach LaVine, I'm not going to hate it. I'm just saying that I like other opportunities right now other than a Zach LaVine. Now, if they shoot the shot, I've been begging for change. I've been begging for change every single damn day we do this. So if they do it, then that's great. And I will be behind it. I will be here every week with Lance to discuss why it was good or bad. I will. But I don't mind going in a different direction with it.
That's fair. And I mean, we've talked about tons of different directions this team can go in, whether it's Zach LaVine, Brandon Ingram, Tobias Harris, Michael Porter Jr., Karl Anthony Towns, and the list goes on. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
The Pistons do have money to play with. It depends on if other teams want to go on the playground with them and play.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about two players on the Pistons roster currently. One of them is Jaden Ivey. The other one is Ausar Thompson. And we're going to talk about them briefly about whether we see them as long-term starters or bench pieces, whether it's with the Pistons or another team. But we're going to start with Jaden Ivey. And this one is it's more of a tougher topic to approach because, one, I don't have a crystal ball in front of me. I can't see the future. I don't want to be dismissive or downplay Jaden Ivey's abilities as a basketball player, but right now I don't see him as a long-term starter in the NBA. I see him more as a rotation piece, not even quite like a six-man because the bag isn't there quite yet. Now I could see him potentially having like a Colby White type career where the first couple of seasons he's putting up good numbers, but he really hasn't figured out the NBA game. Then he just blossoms into this 25-5 guy, which is great for Colby White. I don't know if, I could see something like that happen for Jaden Ivey. If he is in a Pistons uniform next season, what I want to see the Pistons do, whether it's with Monty Williams or with another head coach, I want to see him come off the bench and I want to see the second unit offense cater to his abilities as a downhill threat because Jaden Ivey plays with one speed and it's fast, but that speed gets him into trouble. He's not a great playmaker. He only can beat guys off the dribble. The pull-up game's not quite there yet. There's no in-between game. There's a lot of things for him to work on. I do think there's ability, but right now, the way he currently plays, and there's only been a little bit of development heading in the right direction from him, I just don't see him as a long-term starter.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I do think he'd be a hell of a second unit starter. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Does it make sense? I think it makes sense. Second unit, like the go-to guy in the second unit. I think with the way he plays, with how fast he is, and I think he was in the tops in the NBA in transition buckets. Like I think he didn't lead, but he was high up in that category for the NBA last year. You're right. He plays with one speed, and sometimes it can be a little out of control, or sometimes it can be in control and it looks great. But I don't think he's a starter in this team, and I think a lot of people understand that, and he just doesn't fit the way we want to have our starting five run. But if you were to put him in the second unit, being the seventh, maybe sixth or seventh guy off the bench, while you bring in rotation pieces behind him, if you could maybe supply him with a lot of catch and shoot guys that can, like your Zach LaVine statistics, even though he wouldn't play second unit, but if you can give him guys that are capable of just catching and shooting, I think he could be a lot more successful. But he would also have to slow down his pace to be able to be more in control, to be able to make those passes. Two guys in the corner or kick back out for a three. But it's really hard to see him as a starter anymore with how Monty used him and how he showed his skill set in his first year in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think a Zach LaVine would open up his game as well too, just being that threat from the outside. Defenses would have to pay attention more to Zach LaVine and not just dedicate so much to Jaden Ivey. It's something I said to Steve and Andy, and I'll say it to you. I just think there's too much rawness to his game right now. I don't think Monty Williams put him in the best position either, but I think it's so tough to say with Jaden Ivey because there is a world where you see where he's very successful in the NBA, not an all-star, but like a good starter or a spot starter in a good six man. But he has to develop that handle. That has to get tighter. He has to develop some way to break down the defense, not just has he go to the rim, beat them with one quick first step. It just doesn't, you have to develop more. And until he does that, it's really hard to see him as a full-time starter in the NBA. Because I feel like we've seen guys like him before where they have all the physical tools where they are just a blur, but the other parts of the games don't come along. And then eventually we see them either bouncing around from team to team or just dropping 30 a game overseas somewhere. And I hate to say it, but that very well could be the future of Jaden Ivey if he doesn't develop other parts of his game outside of the athletic gifts that he has.
I think that's how how he rose his draft stock, like to be to the point where the Pistons would take him. That's how he was so good in college, is just because he was so reliant on his speed, which is crazy because he is a blur. The man is very fast and he can be very hard to guard. But if you're leaving him open for uncontested threes that he can't knock down only like 28% of the time, he's not going to be a threat anywhere in the NBA, I don't think. Now, there might be a lot of teams that could be contenders that maybe are looking for his type of play. So maybe we could get draft value or trade value out of him. But I don't know. I still think you give him another year. I want to see what else he has, because 1 year into the league, I don't think you should completely judge a player quite yet. I kind of want to see him in the system, maybe with a new coach, whether we do it or we don't. With a new front runner in the organization and leading the charge, I think we give Ivey another chance. Maybe not as a starter, depending on how we go with the draft or who we pick up in free agency. But I still think that he could actually be a good piece of this team. Because he wants to win. Didn't you guys talk about that interview? He doesn't really care if he's coming off the bench or he's starting. The dude's a winner. He just wants to win games.
No, and that's why I want him to succeed in Detroit. I love that mentality from a player where, look, I'm willing to put the individual stuff on hold, for the betterment of the team. And that's great, but then develop the skill set that's helped the team to win. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's why I say give him more time, because you don't know in one offseason. It could be different. Him coming next year, he could be shooting 35, 37% from three. We don't know. So we give him opportunity.
You're right. There is a sophomore slump. That is a real thing. That's why they call it a sophomore slump. And I believe I'm actually directly quoting Steve that said that when I was on on the Res Ball podcast. It's just, I don't know if I really see it. I don't know if it's something that I'm willing to. I guess it's like this. Do the Pistons have time to let Jaden Ivey have that Kobe White type career where the first few years, like I said, you're kind of puttering around, putting up good numbers, but it's just not all clicking. Everything that goes on with the Pistons organization right now is on Cade's timeline because he is a bona fide all-star talent in the NBA. So you're on his timeline. You want to get this right. You don't want, Jaden Ivey to figure it out 3 or 4 years from now and then Cade say, all right, I'm out, because then you're basically where you're at right now. So the question for me is, do you find someone to replace Jaden Ivey and let him continue to develop off the bench? Or do you just say, hey, we're going to try to let Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham figure this out for the next few seasons because we have time? I guess that's kind of the question I'm looking at. But
no, I don't. Well, I don't think that that's what you do. I don't think you see if they have time to develop, because we don't have a whole lot of time to be good. We want to start winning now. It looks as if we're starting to make those moves to try to start bettering this team to not be the worst team in the NBA. So I don't think you don't give him the opportunity to be like sink or swim. I don't think you put him in that situation. I think you give it to the point where you bring him off the bench, and as he progresses and shows that he's gotten better and maybe the skills that he lacked of last year, if they start to progress, then maybe you can start inserting him to the starting lineup. But I don't think you move on from him yet. I don't think it's time yet for him to move away. I think he actually cares about the organization. I think he wants to be better. Maybe the coaching was the issue. We don't know. So I think in due time, we'll figure it out. I think you give Jaden Ivey 1 more year, and if he's everything that we saw last year, then I think you go ahead and you move on from it. But giving him the opportunity to start next to Cade, if we draft a guard or we bring in a guard like Zach LaVine, I don't think that's what you do with Jaden Ivey, because we're still have a bad taste in our mouth of him not having success with Cade. So I think if you run him off the bench, and he will get minutes with Cunningham, depending on foul trouble and depending on how they rotate, whatever's on Monty's little fucking card of rotation sheets, he'll get minutes, yes or no, on it. But I don't think you break it up quite yet. I know in due time, I think there'll be a team that would like him and what he brings to the table. So, but one more year with Jaden, I don't have a problem with it. I think you give him and Cade time because I think Cade actually wants to be successful with him. I don't think because neither of them really hated on it. Granted, I don't think you go to the public and say I don't like playing with this guy, but we can see how genuine they are with each other and see how they want to play off each other at least for one more year.
It does seem like they root for each other and they do want to be teammates, but I think also too, if you're Cade Cunningham, you're probably asking yourself, how does this guy make me better and how does he elevate my game? But we'll see. So the second player we're going to talk about is Ausar Thompson. Is he a long-term starter or a bench piece? You and I we both view him differently. I believe he's more of a utility player where, the sky's the limit for this guy. There's a lot of things he's great at. It's his on-ball defense, his rebounding, his mid-range game is pretty good. His rim pressure is great. He has good vision as a passer, but his handle is kind of weak. The three-point shooting needs to be there, but there's just so much to love about his game. He reminds me of Sean Merriman. He reminds me of an Andre Karolinko. He reminds me of a player in that kind of mold where they're just so good at everything else, but the outside shot, kind of limits to how great they can be, even though they're still pretty great at everything else that they do. So I believe he is a long-term starter. I believe you're going to see him play a lot of different roles in the NBA, whether it's the 4, whether it's the 3, maybe even a little bit of 2, maybe even 5 in some crazy lineups. Who knows? But Ausar Thompson, I believe he's a long-term starter, and I don't believe he's a bench piece.
I'm not going to win this argument with you. It's we've gone back and forth way too hard on this. You think he's going to be an all-star in the next 3 years, and I don't think that'll be the case at all. I don't know, man. With what he brings to the table, his game hasn't matured yet. I don't think he's the same as Ivey. Like, we haven't seen the best of him yet. So I could be 100% wrong, and he could come on the podcast like, "Hi, I told you 3 years down the line, I'm an all-star, and congratulations." Like, I want success out of all these guys, but when it comes to seeing if he's going to be a bench piece or a starter, I think ultimately comes down to what we bring into this team. Now, if you want a guy at the 3 position that is going to guard, and unfortunately, did he have foul trouble last year? Like, he ran into that a couple of times, I think.
Yeah, every
with
rookie does.
Foul troubles. So I'm afraid like Jaden Ivey had a sophomore slump. You're not afraid that Ausar is going to have the same thing. He's not going to progress the same way. I think in due time we can see how this goes. But with the role that he has, like in a team with Cade trying to set people up for shots, he just doesn't fit in this starting role with how Cade wants to run the offense. So unless he progresses better and gets his 3-point shot up, I don't think he's a starter. Could he come off the bench, or could he maybe just start as your defensive shutdown, lockdown guy? We could do that as well, but it makes me nervous that he doesn't progress the ways that we want him to.
I think you'll have less. I feel like his sophomore slump will be less noticeable because you don't really slump as a rebounder. You don't really slump so much as a defender. Those are the 2 things that he's very good at that, you can still hide his offensive woes as a sophomore because he can play to such a high level in those 2 skills. But as for the foul trouble, he fouled out of 1 game, and then he had 7 games with 5 fouls. Then he had 26 with 3 to 4 and 23 with 1 to 2, and actually 6 games with 0 fouls. And I feel like a lot of those fouls, I hate saying that word. I feel like a lot of those games where he did have a lot of fouls, it was because he's a rookie trying to figure out NBA refereeing, and they were giving him a bad whistle in some of those games, like they do for a lot of rookies. But anyways, like maybe Ausar Thompson isn't the full-time starter next year, but I do think he's going to be a huge part. And I think his game, even though he does struggle offensively, is going to be it still helps out winning more than Jaden Ivey does currently. But that's all I have to say about Ausar Thompson.
Too is like you see all these good teams that are making the NBA, like the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. These teams are deep. So even if these 2 are not your starters and you're off the bench guys that are still giving you good minutes, then I think that's where you want to sit with them. Like, why would you want to? I love going back and talking about the podcast that you were on. Hopefully, maybe we can have some people check that out because it actually was a really good listen. But like, it's important to have guys with lower salaries earn high minutes and they're like high productive minutes on a team. And I think that's what these guys can provide on this team is maybe being 6th, 7th, and 8th man off the bench. Maybe start until we find a guy that's better in that position than they are. Like right now, they're kind of a band-aid in the starting lineup. But I think if as long as we keep them and they keep performing at a decent rate, I think it's great to have them off the bench. Because they're both high energy, like they're high energy players, and I think that's one thing about a game that you can't teach is these guys how physical they are and how fast they play and their motivation like to play the way that they play. So I think coming off the bench, I think it'd be really good for what we have right now.
No, and that's a great point you make. Like they are very much a band-aid. Like if you can't, you got to play with you got to play who's on your roster, and that's something I've always said. Like, if you don't have better players, you're going to have to put these guys in roles that they're not capable of playing in right now. And they're going to struggle. They're going to look worse. They're going to develop bad habits. So if you acquire better players and you put these guys, like you're saying, the 7th or 8th man on a roster, they're going to look that much better in limited minutes. And I think both of them they would take advantage of something like that, and that would ultimately be better for their young careers at this point. But again, when it comes to long-term starters, I think Ausar has the skill set right now where it's going to develop, where he will be a long time an effective starter over a Jaden Ivey, because outside of shooting and cleaning up the ball handling for Ausar, there's not many weaknesses to his game. But with Jaden Ivey, it's like, dude, if he does this or if he does that, if this develops, or if he's put in the right system, if he's given the ball more, if he can do that, there's a lot more questions when it comes to Jaden Ivey, at least in my opinion, than there is for Ausar Thompson.
Yeah, and two, like as much as I denied every ounce of not wanting it, say they do bring in a Zach LaVine. I think Zach LaVine, I don't know how much mentoring is in the NBA. Like I don't know how much it really matters to young players, but Zach LaVine could really help both of their games because I think he has already both of how they play, like their play style in his own bag. Like I think it could really help both of them get better if he's that type of player. Like if he's the type to be a leader like that, to lead in the locker room or lead at practice, to show them the ways that he got better, I think it would really improve both of their games because like we talked about, they both want to be winners, man, essentially. Like, and that's what's going to get them paid in the long run. You're not going to get paid when you're on a 14-win team. That's not going to happen. So whether they want to go and play for a different team, they overall have to be successful. So as long as they're wanting to learn and maybe we bring in a veteran that can teach them, I think Zach LaVine would be a wonderful spot for that.
No, that's a great point too. You have an elite athlete that learned to play the NBA game by leveraging his athletic ability.
Yeah.
And ultimately becoming an all-star and a 25 points per game scorer. Like it's fantastic. So yeah, I think it would be great to have him on there. But again, I don't know how much mentoring he's going to do. But
yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure. Yeah, go on.
It's. I think it's different with every player, man. I don't know how important that is for people to bring in older players. Like, do rookies actually listen to them? Like, do they go out of their way to teach rookies? Like, do they do any of that? I'm not really sure. I don't see Zach LaVine as much of a teacher, but maybe he leads just by what he does, and people copy that. So I don't know. I think it's a good thing to have this conversation about Ausar Thompson and Jaden Ivey, because if we have to bring them off the bench, it's not going to hurt the team. I don't think it'll do any damage to this team. I think they both provide different types of play styles that can make us into a more successful team overall.
Yeah, I think if Jaden Ivey and Ausar asked the questions, Zach LaVine would give the answers. And he is a guy that is it was a clip that I saw a couple seasons ago of him working with why am I just, a trainer, and they were working on like the FIBA rules and what he could get away with. And it was just so crazy how like detailed they were going into those training sessions and how much he was soaking up in the questions he was asking. Like it really is great. And I think there is a lot of knowledge that he could pass on. And again, having an elite athlete like that on the team to help them, use their athletic ability in the NBA game, that's priceless. It's more than 100. It's worth more than 140 million.
And I know that we probably should cut this off, but I like to keep talking about it because too is the Chicago Bulls are a young team as well. So, and then yes, he played 25 games, but the years that he played with all these young players, they're winning games. So it's better than what we're doing right now. So whether he wants to work and if I'm Zach LaVine, why would I not want to go to a roster like this where I'm basically the one or two guy? Like I can be a leader in this type of this type of situation. Like it's a brand new situation for him. Maybe he wants to end his career with a newer team and trying to be successful and do a rebuild. But if you bring him in, I don't know how much of a rebuild it actually is because he should bring us out of that 14 wins within one season if we could get at least 65 games out of him.
And that's what you're hoping with when you trade for him. And
Yeah.
that's most likely what you're going to get. And also, it does benefit him being on a team like this where, you still get an opportunity to put up gaudy numbers. You can still be a 25-point scorer. You can still be a 25, 5-5 guy.
Yeah.
But also, it gives you a chance to play with a guy like Cade, who during the offseason, when he was playing with Team USA, everybody was raving about him. And, you're still in the Eastern Conference where it is very weak compared to the Western Conference. So even though you're on a 14-win team the previous season, it doesn't mean things can't go right and you can catch lightning in a bottle where you can maybe make some noise and get to a play-in game or maybe even get to a playoff game. Like you can very well do that in the Eastern Conference, especially with the new draft class that's coming in 2025, where there are going to be teams that say, hey, we're just going to blow it up and we're going to try to tank and try to get one of these guys like a Cooper Flag or whatever at the top of the draft that can change our fortunes. Yeah, you never know with Zach LaVine and Cade Cunningham what could possibly happen.
Yep.
But we'll see. I want to thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do us a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and hit the follow button. After you hit the follow button, rate with 5 stars and tell us why you would want Zach LaVine or why you wouldn't want Zach LaVine. But more importantly, tell a Pistons fan.